Okay, next up we have Mr. Doug Dougherty. And Doug Dougherty is the president and CEO of GEO. Don't look at my pointer yet.
Okay. Sorry.
The Geothermal Exchange Organization. GEO is the National Trade Association for the U.S. geothermal heat pump industry. Doug offers a presentation on the market barriers and drivers to the U.S. geothermal industry. Mr. Dougherty.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to be pretty quick, and I didn't know I was going to be the last speaker today until I saw the agenda a few days ago. And so the last thing you want to go out on is a real negative note about all the barriers and challenges we have in industry. So I'm going to try not to be Debbie Downer and try to put a little levity into this, but here goes. So we are the National Trade Association representing the geothermal heat pump industry. We really have 4 areas of focus. We have partnerships with like organizations that are involved in energy efficiency and renewable. We are intimately involved in the development of standards. We've done some research, and our main focus is advocacy, both at the federal and state level. And for those of you who don't know, advocacy is the politically correct term for lobbying. So we do a lot of that both at the federal and state level. So I'm going that way. Okay. So let's just get this out of the way. This is our vision. As a National Trade Association representing the geothermal heat pump industry, this is what we want to get to. So if you'll notice, there's no combustion, there's no air source heat pump. It gets us to where we want to be in terms of the zero net energy building on a residential side. It's geothermal heat pumps is the main component. So why, if everybody sort of agrees that that's a good vision to have and we ought to strive to get there, why is it so difficult for us to get there? And I want to talk about some of the public policy challenges we have that's preventing us from getting there. And I'll give you some concrete examples of what we've been up against both at the state level across the country. So I'm going to break it down into outdated regulatory policies. I'm going to talk about silos of regulation, use of outdated tests and measurements, and the underestimation of peak reduction. So if you think about us getting to a zero net energy building using geothermal heat pumps, we have to have greater adoption of our technology. We're too small, we're too nascent at this point. We don't have large economies of scale to drive down costs. We don't have great adoption. So we're still considered sort of the fringe technology. And if we can get rid of some of these barriers and have greater adoption, greater penetration into the market, and greater consumer awareness about our technology and how great it is, we think we'll be on our road to getting to where we want to be. But we've got these barriers that we were up against in a lot of different states. So I talk about, we still have the old regulatory paradigm of we regulate natural gas companies and we regulate electric companies. We don't regulate energy companies. And the classic example I give is that I live in Illinois, and in Illinois, geothermal heat pumps are not considered efficient. So I went to the chairman of the Public Utility Commission and I said, with all due respect, Mr. Chairman, why aren't geothermal heat pumps considered efficient? And he looked at me and said, I don't know. And I said, well, if you don't know, who does? And he said, well, you should talk to the general manager of the commission. So I went to him. He's a friend of mine. I said, John, why aren't we considered energy efficient? He said, it's the way the law's written. So I said, can you give me the citation? So we looked at the law, and the law said energy efficiency is the reduction of electricity or natural gas. Well, since we increase electricity in the winter modestly, we weren't getting the energy efficiency savings for heating or domestic hot water. And we couldn't pass an old test, a total resource cost test, to determine whether utilities could promote our technology as being efficient. So I said, okay, now I know what I have to do. I have to hire a lobbyist, work a legislative session, introduce a bill, get it passed that basically redefines the definition of energy efficiency. And we did something really radical. We defined energy efficiency as the reduction of total energy consumed expressed in BTUs for an end use. Revolutionary, right? Energy efficiency is using less energy. It's not using less therms of gas, and it's not using less kilowatt hours of electricity. It's reducing the energy consumption for an end use. Well, the bill passed, and I said, wow, we're done. Now the utilities can promote geothermal heat pumps as being efficient. Oh, no. Now you have to change the technical resource manual that the utilities use to determine whether it passes the total resource cost test. So I spent a year of my life in a bureaucratic minefield trying to change the technical resource manual that determines whether we're cost effective from a utility basis. And so, again, going through that chapter revision of the geothermal heat pump section of the technical resource manual, finally got it done. We wanted 9 revisions to that, and we got all 9 adopted in the final version. So the end result is, for the first time in the history of Commonwealth Edison, fairly large electric utility in northern Illinois that serves 3.8 million people, for the first time in the history of their company, this fall they're going to announce a geothermal residential heat pump rebate program. It took me 3 years to get there. And that's what I call an outdated regulatory policy, that it took 3 years to allow a utility to promote the most efficient way to heat and cool a building. I talked a little bit, the total resource cost test, it's antiquated. And you think about now the new one is the time-dependent value calculation. We keep coming up with these new tests and measurements, which are very complicated, and the only people who understand them are third-party consultants that run these equations and these logarithms and algorithms, and it really makes no sense. There's a very simple way to determine whether something's efficient or not, and we go through these mental gymnastics to try to do that. We've talked about lack of societal benefits. We don't get the true credit for CO2 reduction. And when we go at the state level, we go to the public utility commissions and we say, why don't you give us credit for air quality benefits, CO2 reduction? They go, well, that's an EPA issue. We said, well, no, there's a societal benefit of having better reduction of CO2s. Why don't you guys allow us to capture that? No, that's an EPA thing. So again, we have these silos of regulation. And then we don't have indoor air quality. So health benefits for better indoor air quality. The schools, I give the example, when schools retrofit, and we saw the school in Dougherty, Illinois, when we talked to the principals that put in a geothermal heat pump system, took out the old boiler, and have air conditioning as well as heating, and the energy cost for the entire year is less than what it was just to heat the building, I say, wow, great to have reduction of energy costs. You can put more into computers and pension funds and all that. And they go, no. The biggest benefit we have on the retrofit is a significant reduction of absenteeism by teachers and students. I said, wow, that's significant. He said, yes, it's unbelievable how many times teachers are not sick now and how many times kids are not sick. And I said, wow, that's a real benefit. He goes, no, well, if we have less substitute teachers and we have kids in school more often than not, what happens? Higher test scores. So my new slogan is, make your kids smart and put in a geothermal heat pump. So this is the new barrier, and we're coming up against this in dozens of states where, when energy efficiency portfolio standards were put in place through law, they were given to the Public Utility Commission to have the oversight of those energy efficiency programs. What legislatures typically didn't do was give the Public Utility Commission headcount to manage these programs. So again, Illinois, I use the Illinois example. We have a $240 million annual energy efficiency program for the utilities. Well, its management and its oversight and the regulatory oversight that's put on those programs are basically run by third-party consultants. And we have found time and time again where these third-party consultants that are driving these programs, whether what works and what doesn't work and what they're pushing the utilities to do, doesn't include geothermal heat pumps. And you start looking at some of their past papers and some of the studies they've done, they have a clear bias against geothermal heat pumps. For what reason, I don't know. I might have an idea that it might have something to do with the little blue flame, but I'm not going to go there. But nevertheless, we're finding that there is a distinct bias in a lot of states that use third-party consultants to oversee the energy efficiency programs. So one of the things that drives me absolutely crazy is the continued use of this term fuel switching. And when they say fuel switching, well, you're taking out a fossil fuel furnace and you're putting in an electric heat pump. That's fuel switching. I said, no, that's not really fuel switching. Fuel switching was a term back in the 80s when you took out a propane furnace and you put in a natural gas furnace, or you took out an electric furnace and you put in a natural gas furnace. None of those could be more than 100% efficient. So you were actually just fuel switching. Today, when I could take out something that's 80% fuel efficient and I put in something that's 500% efficient, how is that fuel switching? It's not fuel switching, it's technological transformation. Yet we still get hung up on this arcane term of fuel switching. And who's promoting that? The gas industry. And so it's actually in certain statutes around the country, in state statute, there's a prohibition on fuel switching. And so that knocks geothermal heat pumps out of being an efficiency gain. So we changed the law in Vermont, we changed the law in Illinois, we've got proposals to change it in other states, but it's on the books, and it's a public policy barrier to the deployment of geothermal heat pumps in a particular state. And this is the newest one, and this is no more relevant than it is here in this fine state of California, that a borehole is not a well. And if you're going to have the water well regulatory body, because when you call it a well, guess where it gets put from a regulated standpoint? It gets put in the drinking water section of the water well code, right? So if you're going to tell us that we're a well and hold us to the same standards and force us to increase the diameter of our borehole by 2 inches and increase the amount of grout that we're going to have to put in by 50%, you've just killed our market. Thank you very much, Mr. Regulator. So we have to push and stop using the term well, and it was used several times today, and I won't point fingers at anybody, but it's a ground heat exchanger. We have to go back to the term that we coined 30 years ago, GHX. It's a ground heat exchanger. It's a borehole. It's just a very deep post hole that we fully grout from the bottom to the top. It's not a pathway to contaminating groundwater. And we always get this argument that, oh no, you know, you're a pathway to contaminating surface water, drinking water. And we say, where's the example? Show us anywhere in the country where we've had this huge breakout of contaminating drinking water because of boreholes for geothermal heat pumps. No one can even give me one anecdotal evidence of that happening. Yet we are up against this state by state by state, county by county by county. There was a county in Washington state that wanted to have that our boreholes and our headers had to be terrorist proof. Because I'm serious. And the project, it was a 200 home subdivision, was going to go all geothermal. They gave up. They couldn't fight it because the local water guy said, no, somebody can pour cyanide down. Some terrorist can pour cyanide down, you know, get access to your header and pour cyanide down, and it's going to contaminate the drinking water of the town. So we're not issuing a permit. So it gets that ridiculous. But we need to be very cognizant about when this starts popping up. We need to take care of it. We've been active in not only Washington State, North Carolina, a bunch of other states, Illinois, but I know California has something right in the works right now, and if it's not done correctly, it's going to kill the market. So we talked a little bit about this. I would say when Paul Boney goes ahead of me, it's always a testament of how many of my slides he uses, of how great I'm doing. So there'll be a couple of, 2 of my 14 slides Paul already had. But this underestimation of peak, I just want to reinforce that I just heard an update on this presentation by Western Farmers. They're a generation and transmission cooperative in Oklahoma. I think they serve 18 or 20 distribution co-ops. They're very large. And they're actually in a growth area, and they did a long-range plan that said, I'm going to have to build a power plant, 30-megawatt power plant. And the management said, no, we're going to get this through energy efficiency as a resource. So go have a geothermal heat pump and an air source heat pump program in lower peak. And so they did a little demonstration program where they sub-metered some geothermal heat pumps and some air source heat pumps. And what they found was that at super peak, which is now the norm in Oklahoma, is 105 degrees. How does a geothermal heat pump reduce kW demand at 105 degrees? They estimated it would reduce 0.66 kW per ton. And when they sub-metered at 105, it wasn't 0.66, it was 0.65. The air source heat pumps, on the other hand, were rated to at 105 degrees reduce peak per ton air source, 0.33, it was 0.16. And they said, whoa, wait a second, we got to redefine our program. We got to promote geothermal heat pumps and not air source heat pumps. But if you looked at the ratings of these machines, the assumption would be that you would get 0.33 of peak reduction for an air source heat pump, and that's not the case. The updated study is they retrofitted 22 homes, all with geothermal heat pumps, in August of 2013, and sub-metered all 22 homes. And unfortunately, in 2014, it was one of the coolest summers in Oklahoma history. But they were able to establish now, they've sub-metered everything, they got 0.52 kW reduction, and I don't think it ever got over 100 in Oklahoma in the summer of 2013 or 2014. So this is Paul's slide. And not only on the cooling side, on the heating side, the COP versus whatever rating now the air source heat pump guys are using, which is, I think, well, we talked about EER, and now the air source heat pump conveniently converted that to SEER, Seasonal Energy Efficiency Rating, because it made them look better. So now on the heating side, they're pushing cold climate air source heat pumps. So now they don't express it in COP. The air source heat pump industry expresses it in their new term, the heating seasonal performance factor. What the heck is that? It's COP. You come up with a new thing that totally rigs the rating system to their benefit. So from a national perspective, we need to rethink how we rate equipment, and we're letting it get away from us, and people are using it against our industry. VRF, that was a new thing on commercial slides. We've seen this, Paul had this, but this was a $100,000 research program that my association paid for, and we had Oklahoma State University and Oak Ridge National Laboratory spend 2 years looking at the ASHRAE building in Atlanta. Half of that was heated and cooled with a VRF system, and half was heated and cooled with a geothermal heat pump system. They did a 2-year study, and here's the peak reduction. You can see, Paul had a slide to that, but geothermal 44% more efficient than the VRF. And so proof's in the pudding. This is a 2-year scientifically peer-reviewed study of comparing apples to apples. And we stand by this, obviously. This is an old slide, but again, the peak reduction, we have solid evidence that clearly shows how we can reduce peak. This is a Garrett building, 2 identical buildings, one with a traditional HVAC system, the other one with a geothermal heat pump, 35% peak reduction in Oklahoma. This is a franchise in Pensacola, Florida. The franchisee built 2 identical McDonald's. He put one in with a conventional HVAC, he put one in with geothermal heat pump. There's the difference, sort of like the school slide. So peak reduction is there. We don't get enough credit for what we do for peak reduction. So what are we trying to do in terms of renewable? We're trying to get, we've tried 3 years to get into the legislative definition, the federal government's definition of clean energy. Because clean energy in the existing statute in the federal government defines clean energy as renewable generated by, and unless we can put in the subphrase that says, or thermal energy avoided by a geothermal heat pump, we're not considered renewable. So as Lisa said, are we renewable, are we efficient? We're both. We're very efficient because we have a renewable aspect to our technology. So after 3 years of trying to do this legislatively, the president did it in 1 day. He issued an executive order in March, just last month, that said geothermal heat pumps are a form of renewable energy. And so now we are going back to the legislature, and April 30th, there's a bill before the Senate Energy Committee that will, we're asking for an amendment that would legislatively sync up the definition that's in the executive order with the legislative definition. Now, why is this important? Well, it will push the federal government to basically use more of our technology in the federal buildings, but almost as important or more importantly is that it allows me to go state to state and say, of the 38 states that have renewable energy portfolios, and we're not in it because it doesn't say or avoided by, it says generated by, it gives me a better bargaining position to say, well, the federal government's define us as renewable, why don't your state renewable energy portfolio standards define it the same way? So we have been successful in 4 states to date. Maryland, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, New Mexico all have changed their statute to recognize the thermal energy avoided by a geothermal heat pump. And why is that important? Utility adoption. If a utility can aggregate geothermal heat pump thermal energy from BTUs to kilowatts, aggregated to megawatts, and have those as a renewable energy credit, what we've done is we've monetized the value of the heat exchange in the ground from a utilities perspective. And that's an incentive, we think, that a lot of utilities that have trying to meet renewable energy goals, we give them another arrow in their quiver to meet that goal. But in most cases, we have to change the state statute. But by having that federal definition change, it gives us an easier route to go. And I'll finish by saying that from a public policy standpoint, at the state level, we go to change public policy in 3 different areas. Some states renewable, we did it in these 4 states. Some states to change the efficiency definition, as we did in Illinois and Vermont. And in some states, financial incentive through tax credit. And so we have several states that have adopted income tax credits at the state level for the installation of geothermal heat pumps. So we have that in Michigan. New York just introduced 2 bills yesterday, Earth Day, that the Senate actually passed that would form a sales tax exemption and an income tax credit for putting in a geothermal heat pump. So moving the market and changing public policies, both in the tax credit incentive, in the energy efficiency portfolio, and the renewable portfolio, we've got sort of a scan of the United States, and we're trying to change state public policy in all 50 states in those 3 buckets. So that's it. And there's my email address. Feel free to email me with any questions, or I'll take any now.
Anybody have any questions? Nothing online either, so.
All right, great. Thank you.
All right. All right. Well, that was our fun-filled, action-packed information day. We have a closing by Mr. Bill Martin, and really want to say thank you, everybody that's here, everybody that's online. I'll let Bill take over from here.
Thanks for participating in this day. We have discovered that zero net energy without carbon is ready. It's off the shelf. It's incorporated into many different buildings, and it can be done just about anywhere really. And all we need is to get over the regulatory barriers and the definitions, as Doug just mentioned. And I was sharing how my house couldn't be built with the upcoming regulations if they go through as planned. So hopefully we can make some progress